Dry Creek Valley, Nevada Territory, late September 1877. The rain came sudden and hard, the way it does when the desert finally remembers it can cry. It hammered the tin roofs of Holt Ranch and turned the dust to red mud that sucked at a man's boots. Eli Turner sat his buckskin gelding on the ridge above the valley and watched the storm roll in like Judgment Day. He was 32, but the silver at his temples and the hollows under his gray eyes made him look older. 300 miles of bad road, and worse memories lay behind him. The silver mines up near Virginia City had taken everything, his health, his friends, and one man he hadn't been fast enough to pull from a collapse. Below him the ranch lights glowed soft through the downpour. One big house, a tall barn, corrals, smoke curling from a stone chimney. It looked like the kind of place a man could disappear into honest work, and maybe, if God was kind, forget the sound of falling rock. Eli nudged the buckskin down the slope. Frank Holt met him on the porch with a Winchester across his arm and suspicion in his pale eyes. A big cur dog growled low at his heel. "We ain't running a mission, mister." "I ain't a skin for charity," Eli said, palms open. "I need work. I'm good with horses, cattle, fences. I keep my mouth shut and my hands busy." Frank studied the worn rigging on the buckskin. The old Navy coat tied low on Eli's thigh, the quiet steadiness in the stranger's face. Rain dripped from both their hat brims. "Name?" "Eli Turner." Frank's jaw worked. Word travels slow out here, but it traveled. Turner. The name rang a faint bell, and not a good one. Before he could speak, the door behind him opened. A girl stepped out, dry her hands on a dish towel. 21, maybe 22. Dark brown hair pulled back, a few wet curls stuck to her cheek. Eyes the color of creek water after rain. Clear, watchful, unafraid. "Pa! Suppers!" She stopped when she saw Eli. "Ada inside," Frank said without turning. She didn't move right away. Just looked at Eli once. Long enough for something to pass between them neither of them understood yet. Then she was gone, the door closing soft. Frank lowered the rifle fraction. 2 hands short. 30 a month and found. You cause trouble, you're gone before the coffee cools. We clear. Clear as mountain water, sir. The bunkhouse smelled of coal oil, tobacco, and old sweat. 2 men glanced up when Eli ducked inside. Old Pop with his gray whiskers and Jimmy, thin as a fence rail. They nodded once and went back to their business. Eli took the empty cot by the window. Through the streaked glass he could see the big house, lamplight spilling gold onto the wet porch. One window upstairs stayed lit longer than the rest. He wondered whose it was, then told himself it was none of his concern. He lay back, hands behind his head, and listened to the rain on the roof. For the first time in months the ghost stayed quiet. October slid into November. Eli worked from can see to can't see. He fixed windmills, doctored calves, rode the far pastures when the first snow dusted the Ruby Mountains. He spoke little, smiled less, but the cattle gentled under his hands, and the horses nickered when they saw him coming. Ada saw him everywhere. She saw him at dawn leading the remuda out, breath fogging in the cold. Saw him at dusk leaning on a corral rail, cigarette glowing like a small red star. She noticed how he never wasted motion, how he could calm a bronc with nothing more than a low voice and patience. Her father noticed her noticing. One morning they rode together to check a broken fence. Eli was already there, splicing wire with bloody knuckles. "Thought that stretch would hold till spring," Frank grunted. "Next wind will take it clean down," Eli answered. He glanced at Ada, touched his hat brim. "Mornin', Miss Holt." Her heart did something inconvenient. "Morning, Mr. Turner." Frank scowled and kicked his horse forward. Late November, a warm spell. The creek ran high and muddy. Eli spent half a day stacking rock to keep the bank from washing out the north pasture. Ada rode up on her mare, Morning Star. "You don't have to do that alone. Didn't figure your pa put on the work list." He didn't look up. He didn't. She dismounted, rolled up her sleeves, and started lifting stones beside him. For a long minute, only the water talked. "You notice things," she said finally. He wiped sweat with his forearm. "Man alone learns to pay attention. Either that or the world falls apart on him." She wanted to ask about the mines, about the shadows he carried. Instead, she asked, "Why ranch work after the dark?" He paused, stone heavy in his hands. Sun's better company than a tunnel roof. It sounded simple. It wasn't. July 1878. The valley baked. Grass crackled underhoof. Even the cattle stood still in what shade they could find. Eli rode in from the far line camp caked in white dust, throat raw. The spring-fed pond behind the barn was the only cool water for 20 miles. He figured the hands were all in the shade playing cards. He stripped off his sweat-stiff shirt, kicked off boots, and waded in. The shock of cold stole his breath. He sank to his shoulders and let the water wash months of grit and grief away. Ada wasn't looking for him. Morning Star had slipped his pen again, and the tracks led straight to the cottonwoods. She pushed through the willow branches, expecting to scold a colt. Instead, she saw Eli. Water to his waist, sun on his wet skin, scars crossing his back like old trails on a map. He tilted his head back, eyes closed, at peace in a way she'd never seen him. Her breath caught. She took one step backward. A dry twig snapped like a gunshot. Eli turned calm. Water dripped from his arms. Their eyes met through steam and green shade. He didn't flinch, didn't cover himself. Just looked at her with something gentle and amused and a little bit sad. Then, quiet as Sunday morning, he said, "If you're going to watch, miss, might as well tell me your name." Heat flooded her face. She spun and ran, branches whipping her cheeks, heart hammering so loud she was sure he heard it all the way back to the pond. That night she couldn't eat, couldn't sit still. Her father talked about water rights and beef prices, and she heard none of it. She kept seeing Eli standing in the sunlight, water sliding down his chest, that half smile asking for her name like it was the most natural thing in the world. 2 days later, she found him in the corral gentling Morning Star. The colt was trembling, but Eli's hands were steady, voice low and soothing. When the colt finally dropped its head and blew out a breath, Ada leaned on the fence. "He's a good one," Eli said without turning. "Just needs to know who to trust." "I know the feeling," she answered. He faced her then, waited. "It's Ada," she said. He repeated it soft, like tasting it. "Ada." Everything changed after that. They stole moments the way thieves steal gold, quick, guilty, precious. A shared glance across the supper table, when Frank wasn't looking. Her bringing him coffee on night guard, sitting together under a sky so bright with stars it hurt to look. Him telling her about the red canyons of Utah, the big timber in Oregon, the way the ocean smelled at San Francisco. Quiet stories told just to watch her eyes shine. She read him passages from a dog-eared copy of Ivanhoe by lamplight in the barn. He listened like a man hearing church bells after years in prison. One night she asked, "Do you ever think of staying anywhere for good?" He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Thought about it," he said at last. "Never found a place that would have me." She wanted to say "you have now," but the word stuck behind her teeth. August brought word from town. A mine collapse up north. 1 man dead. The foreman. Talk of sabotage. A name repeated in saloons and barbershops. Turner. Frank came home with thunder on his face. He sent Eli to the farthest pastures. The hands quit speaking when Eli walked past. Ada watched her father's fear turn to stone. One dusk, she found Eli at the water trough, washing blood from a cut hand. "I heard the stories," she said. "I don't believe them." He dried his hands slow. "Some things are better left buried, Ada." The way he said her name broke her heart clean in two. September again. Frank waited until the first cold rain. "You ride out when the mud dries," he told Eli in the barn doorway. "You've had good work for me. I won't have you near my daughter." Eli only nodded. "Yes, sir." Ada heard it from the loft, where she'd been hiding with her heart in her throat. 3 days later the roads were passable. Eli packed light. 1 bedroll, 1 rifle, the Navy Colt. 2 hands rode with him to the boundary, like prison guards. They were almost to the gate when thunder cracked and the sky opened again. 3 riders stepped from the trees, slickers shining, guns drawn. Duke Madden grinned under his hat. "Well, Turner, hiding behind petticoats now. Eli's hand moved fast. The world exploded into muzzle flash and rain. Ada heard the shots. She was in the saddle before her father could stop her, riding bareback through the storm. She found Rand first, trembling and riderless. Then Eli, slumped against the same cottonwood where she'd first seen him bathe. Blood soaked his shirt, mixing pink with the rain. She slid from her horse and fell to her knees. Eli. His eyes fluttered. Ada shouldn't be here. I'm not leaving you again. She pressed her hands to the wound, tears mixing with rain. Not ever. Silas and the hands found him like that, her holding him while the storm washed the blood into the pond. 2 days later, Eli woke to lamplight, and Ada asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand still in his. When she opened her eyes and saw him awake, she started crying all over again. You came back, she whispered. You were calling me, he said, voice rough. Frank Holt stood in the doorway later, hat crushed in his hands. Duke Madden talked before he died, he said. You pulled 3 men out of that collapse. Saved the rest by lighting the fuse that brought the mountain down on the crooks who set the charge. It wasn't your fault the foreman was too slow. Eli looked at the ceiling. Some debts don't get paid. Frank's voice cracked. I misjudged you, son. I'm sorry. Eli met his eyes. You were protecting your daughter. Can't fault a man for that. October dawned, pale and gold. Eli was strong enough to sit asaddle again. Ada packed her own bedroll, without asking permission. Frank watched from the porch, face carved deep with new lines. He didn't try to stop her. At the ridge above the valley, Ada reined in beside Eli. The ranch lay small and perfect below them, smoke rising straight in the still air. I think the gate isn't back there, she said softly. Eli looked west where the mountains met the sky. No, he agreed. It's out there somewhere. She smiled, the first real smile in weeks. Then let's go find it. Side by side, they rode down the far slope. 2 horses, 2 hearts, the whole untamed west opening wide before them. Behind them, the ranch lights winked out one by one, and the wind carried the scent of sage and rain, and beginning again.